Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course it's my honor to stand here today on behalf of the citizens of Saskatoon West and speak to this bill, C-12. I'm going to speak mainly about the immigration aspects of this bill today. The first thing that comes to mind when I look at this bill is, why are we here? What is it that is causing all this to happen? The member in her speech was just speaking about these changes in her mind that have happened, and in reality, these aren't things that were imposed upon us so much as it created by the Liberal government. There are many, many things that are happening in our immigration system, at our border, and with crime in our country that can be traced directly to actions by this Liberal government over the last 10 years. If we go back prior to the Harper government, there were some very strong measures in place, such as mandatory minimums, such as consecutive police sentences. Police had the power to actually give consequences to criminals. And you know what? Crime was down. If you picture, Mr. Speaker, a V, when the Conservatives were in power before, violent crime was dropping, just like this side of the V, was dropping significantly. And mysteriously, when the Liberals took over, we got this, and violent crime went back up. Why? Because of all the changes that they made to the laws to be lenient on criminals. And these are some of the things that were done. It wasn't that it was imposed on us from an outside force. And these changes had real consequences for the people of Saskatoon West. And so now here we are with the government trying to fix something that they created in the first place. So don't be fooled by what you're hearing here today. This is cleanup of a mess that was made by this government. So I want to talk about immigration. And as I start, I want to just highlight something that I've noticed in online and in other communications that I've had with people and voters and Canadians. And that is a bit of a disturbing trend of attitude towards newcomers, towards immigrants in our country. And as I said, there's a lot of problems for sure. Everybody knows that our immigration system has many, many problems. We have a lot of crime in our country in general. We also have problems at our borders. So there are lots of problems in Canada. And our immigration system is quite broken at the moment, for sure. But that doesn't mean it's the fault of newcomers to our country. And I think we all have to be reminded in this room and anybody that's watching that unless you're an Indigenous person in this country, we all are immigrants. We've all come from that background. I myself, my grandparents were new immigrants to this country, so I would be the, I guess, second generation born in Canada, which makes me, I think, the third generation immigrant in Canada. And I'm sure many of us have the same story. And it's really important to remember that what's happening in our country right now in immigration is not the fault of newcomers that have come here. It all started back in 2017 when Prime Minister Trudeau made his famous tweet that basically said, "Welcome to Canada." That told people all around the world that Canada wanted everybody to come here, and guess what? They responded. Many people came. They responded by selling their homes, by leaving their families, by leaving everything behind and coming to Canada because Canada wanted them. The Prime Minister himself said that Canada wanted them. Well, in reality, the Prime Minister did that without having any clue as to how he was going to deal with that and how many people were going to respond and what would happen to those who responded. And so I come back to the broken system that we have. If a person is feeling anger towards immigration in our country, that anger needs to be directed where it belongs, and that is to the Liberal government that was in power and is still in power. They're the ones who had the chance to set the rules. They're the ones who, in some cases, chose not to make rules. They're the ones who set the numbers. They're the ones who decided how many millions of people could come in as temporary residents. They're the ones who invited people in peril, like people from Hong Kong, people from Ukraine, people from Sudan. They're the ones who invited them to come to Canada. In fact, just this morning I was reading a story about a family from Ukraine who has been here for a number of years through the QIT program. And now they're having trouble getting their visas, getting anything moving forward. And in fact, in the story, it says the humanitarian compassionate stream, which is where the Ukrainian people would fit into, faces waits of up to 50 years. 50 years. It also says that for caregivers, it's up to 9 years. For the agri-food stream, it's 19 years. For entrepreneurs under the startup visa stream, it's 35 years. Mr. Speaker, these are ridiculous numbers. How can somebody that was invited to come to our country expect to wait 50 years to get some sort of, to get permanent residency in our country? It's part of the brokenness that we see in this system. And of course, the Liberal government created this mixed up immigration system, you know, it used to be a very clean system where we were looking for people with skills to bring to our country, in addition to family members, in addition to asylum seekers and refugee claimants. It was based on skills primarily. And now that has been changed to include all kinds of other political things in those numbers so that people are admitted to Canada not just because of their skills, but because of other reasons that have nothing to do with their talents or their skills. And of course, we all know what has happened in our temporary resident population, whether it's temporary foreign workers, whether it's students. There were completely no checks on student numbers coming into our country. And as a result, people took advantage of that system. Colleges took advantage of that system. There were many unscrupulous immigration consultants that took advantage of that system. And ultimately, regarding refugees and asylum seekers, the system collapsed. There were so many people that were coming in that the system just could not handle it. Even with some increases that were done by the government, we end up with these ridiculous wait times of 4 years or longer for asylum claimants in Canada. And so this is the system that the Liberals created in Canada. And so anyone that feels any negativity towards immigration in our country needs to put that on the Liberal government. They're the ones who created this. Michael Barachewski-MacDonald from the Macdonald-Laurier Institute said this: "The explosion in asylum claims post-Roxham is the result of two simultaneous policy decisions. One, loosening the criteria for visa issuance, and two, allowing visa-free travel for potential asylum seekers. Our quiet asylum crisis is largely a self-inflicted problem." And of course, right on cue, the people looking to profit from these kinds of situations marched right in. So we have fake immigration consultants or immigration consultants who bent the rules to make a lot of money off of this situation. Human traffickers who are literally bringing people into our country to work to make money off their backs. It's human trafficking. Employers taking advantage of temporary workers. And colleges who were able to set up fake colleges and make lots of money off the backs of people coming into our country. And at the end of the day, this was all about money. There's a lot of money to be made through the messed up system that was created by this government. And so now here we are with C-12, which is trying to fix some of this, and it's fixing the big mess that was created by this government. Now, similarly, border security. Border security has become a big problem in our country. You know, everybody remembers Roxham Road. Roxham Road should have been a wall. People should not have been able to cross at Roxham Road, but instead it was convenient because there was a road from New York and a road from Quebec, and so people started crossing at Roxham Road. And the government could have simply just stopped it. They could have put up a little fence. They could have discouraged people from coming across. But what did they do instead? They put RCMP and CBSA officers there and essentially asked them to help people come into Canada. You know, they had this strange thing to say to them: "You're not allowed to cross here, but here, may I help you come into Canada?" I mean, how did that make any sense? And so they literally were helping people, carrying their luggage, bringing them across the border. Once in Canada, they were given pretty good treatment as asylum seekers. And in fact, in that area, it became very common for taxis to just drop people off, come across the road. And a whole industry propped up on the Canadian side of the border related to newcomers that were coming into our country. And essentially, our RCMP and CBSA officers became welcome to Canada greeters. And so guess what? More and more people came. Well, this is what happens when you have a broken system. And even on other parts of our border, tremendous lack of technology. You know, we have technology today that can scan containers. We can find what's in them. We can see exactly what's there. And yet we have very little of this technology. We've not invested where we need to invest, and we don't have the people to do the checks that need to be done. And so as a result, we're seeing a lot of stolen vehicles coming into our country through container loads. We're seeing a lot of drugs, and also the precursor chemicals that are used to make drugs come in unchecked, because we are doing a very poor job of checking what is coming into our country. And of course, guns. You know, we have a lot of illegal guns that are coming across the border that get used in crimes in Canada. And we should be checking more of those things, which we're not. And so we have this gap in our system that has not been corrected by the government, that needs to be. And you know, we have a fairly unorganized enforcement of our border. There's a lot of agencies. There's CBSA, Canadian Border Services Agency. There's the RCMP. There's the Immigration Department, IRCC. There's the IRB, the Immigration Refugee Board, and the Coast Guard, among others, that patrol and monitor our border. And, you know, it's not the members and the people, the hardworking men and women that work for these organizations that are the problem. There's a lot of disorganization in these organizations. There's a lot of lack of resources. There's a lack of information sharing even. You know, these groups are not really allowed because of privacy legislation to be able to share information from one organization to another. And so you end up with a lot of duplicated work that's needed in order to solve crimes. And so these are just some of the things that are missing in the system that we currently have today, and the system that has been created and fine-tuned by this Liberal government. And just last week there was a very funny tweet, I thought, because with all the problems of drugs and all the other things that are going on at the border, you know, the illegal guns coming across and even human trafficking, the Canadian Border Services Agency, what they're focused on right now, at least last week what they were focused on, is this, and it said this: we're taking action to protect our economy. CBSA is investigating whether certain imports of disposable paper plates, bowls, and platters from China are being sold at unfair prices in Canada, dumped or subsidized. This is the priority of CBSA today, given all these other things that are happening. That's embarrassing for me as a Canadian to see that. And of course, surveillance at the border is not happening to any significant degree. You know, the government made a big story about buying a couple of helicopters. Well, a couple of helicopters on a 7,000-kilometer border doesn't do a whole lot. And there's so much more that could be done with surveillance. And so what happens? Organized crime steps in. This is what the real negative aspect of this, because they see an opportunity to make money. So we have international crime rings and cartels that are using Canada as a base of operations for them to do all of their nasty things and make a lot of money off of us, and not just us, but off of the U.S. as well. We have drug smugglers that are smuggling drugs into Canada and then further, you know, into other countries from here. And I spoke about gun smuggling. That's a huge market that happens at our border, as well as human trafficking. All these things are things that we should be focused severely on curtailing and stopping. The RCMP Chief Superintendent and Director General of the National Serious and Organized Crime Program, Matthew Bertrand, said that we are aware that the cartels are a source of a lot of the illicit goods coming into Canada. These organized crime groups, whether they be in Canada or abroad, are using Canada as a transshipment point. Those groups are very much involved in crime impacting Canada. I think that says it all. That a lot of the source of our crime comes from our lack of properly defending our border. And of course, money laundering is another thing that happens in Canada regularly, because we lack the tools and the ability to really see what's happening in that world. So as a result of all of that, we have surging crime in Canada. We've heard this story many times. We have, you know, I spoke at the beginning about the violent crime that we saw under the Harper years, where it decreased, and then how under the Liberal years it has gone right back up again because of actions they've taken. Crime is up significantly under this Liberal government. Gang murders have doubled. Violent crime is up over 39%. And the actions taken by this government have weakened the laws and effectively protected criminals. And for example, Bill C-5, it eliminated mandatory minimum sentences. And as you look around and look at the crimes that are being committed in our cities, and I see it in Saskatoon all the time, there are very few consequences, if any, for committing crimes anymore. And this has emboldened criminals. It's emboldened gangs to get young people involved in crime, because they know that there are just no consequences to committing those crimes. And that's partly because of Bill C-5, where the mandatory minimums were taken away. And this is for significant offenses, Mr. Speaker. Human trafficking, drug trafficking, car theft, assault with a weapon, the list goes on and on. These are things that this Liberal government chose to take away mandatory minimum sentences for. And so as a result, we've seen increases in these kinds of crimes. Because I guess the Liberals wanted to put the criminals first and not Canadians first. We need to restore mandatory sentences to put consequences back into the system for those criminals who commit crimes. The other bill that made a big change in this was Bill C-75. That bill was basically promoting house arrest and essentially made it very difficult to put someone in jail, and as a result, people are out on bail. And so that's where we talk about people are getting bail instead of jail. And what we want to do is make sure that people actually see jail and don't always get bail. This is part of the catch and release problem that we have in our country, where people get arrested for a crime, they get charged with a crime, they get bail, they get out on bail, and they can repeat that offense. And we see that very often in many cases, in many cities in our country. Repeat offenders simply walk free. They don't have any consequences. And as I said, it just encourages them to keep doing what they're doing. It encourages gangs to keep recruiting new members, and it doesn't stop new members of gangs from doing those crimes. And that's why we want to bring back jail, not bail. We want to make sure that, particularly for repeat offenders, there are consequences to those crimes, and that those folks actually do spend some time in jail to slow down the process of crime that's happening. And I just want to mention, you'll often hear the term from this government, bail reform. I just want to talk about that for just a minute, because you have to go back to what actually happened. Bail reform happened about 10 years ago when this Liberal government came in. They implemented bail reform, and these are the things I just described to you. And now all of a sudden they've finally realized, they've finally woken up that this is not working. Canadians have been telling them that for years. They're finally realizing this, and now they want to do, quote, bail reform. Well, really what they're doing is they're fixing the mess they made with bail reform in the first place. So what we're doing now isn't bail reform, it's correcting the system back to the way it was, to actually have consequences for people that are committing crimes. And then also, of course, drugs fuel crime, and that's part of the problem at our border. As I mentioned, drugs are flowing across the border shockingly freely, and so this has caused a big drug problem in our country. We all see it in our cities. I see it in Saskatoon. I'm sure other members see it in their own cities. And part of that is from the permissive harm reduction regime that's been promoted by this government. And in fact, from what I've seen, it creates a cycle of dependence, and in many ways is best compared to a palliative care kind of approach to dealing with people that have addiction issues. And it's not working. Safe supply has resulted in more deaths and more crime, and the number of people on the streets, the number of people that are involved in illicit drug use and in crime are just going up. And so we want to make sure that instead of encouraging drug use by providing free needles, by providing free hard drugs, and all the other programs that this government has done, I think, and Conservatives believe, that we need to actually allow drug users to have a recovery-based system of care. We need to be compassionate with these people. These people need help, and we need to move them forward on the continuum of care so that they can actually get out of the situation that they're in, not just allow them to remain there. So we need to make sure and bring home our safe streets and schools and communities. Well, Mr. Speaker, just to sum up, why are we talking about this today? Well, it's because of the failure of this Liberal government over the last 10 years, and now they're trying to fix the mess that they've created. They're trying to fix the broken immigration system, where we have backlogs that have exploded, where this focus on skilled workers has been lost, where the loopholes are wide open, where we've got consultants and colleges and employers who are taking advantage of the system that we have. We've had 7 immigration ministers in 10 years. It's crazy. The government's also trying to fix the chaos that has at the border, where they lost control of our borders, where illegal crossings are up and enforcement is down, where we're seeing more shipments of stolen vehicles, where we're seeing drugs and precursors to drugs coming across the borders, where we're seeing firearms coming across the borders illegally. And the surging crime that we're seeing in our country, where violent crime is rising and gang activity is rising, and the soft on crime laws are allowing offenders to walk free. So our plan, we have a plan, and that's to fix immigration, to speed up processing for skilled workers. We want to secure the border so that we will close illegal crossings, restore order to the border, and crack down on crime by reintroducing mandatory jail time, ending catch and release, and backing our police to make sure that we can keep our communities safe. That's our plan, Mr. Speaker, and I invite any questions. Thank you.
Order. It is my duty, pursuant to Standing Order 38, to inform the House that the questions to be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands, International Trade. The Honourable Member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South, Justice. And the Honourable Member for Regina, Louvain, Housing. Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to pick up on the immigration issue because now we've had two Conservative members stand in their place and be somewhat critical of the government on immigration policy. You know, it wasn't that long ago where Russia invades Ukraine. Canada opened its doors, and I believe the Conservative Party at the time supported us doing that. And there was approximately 300,000 people of Ukrainian heritage that came to Canada because of the war in Ukraine. My question to the member is, does the member believe that the federal government or the immigration should allow for the extension of the work permits of those people that came from Ukraine?
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, I'm encouraged that the member for Winnipeg North recognized that I was being very critical of his government, so he's listening, so that's good. With respect to the Ukrainian situation and the people that were invited to Canada from Ukraine, this is the core message, I think, is that Canada said to people from Ukraine, come here, we will give you a safe place to stay. We will give you options. And so they came. And now the government is saying, we don't know what to do with you. We don't know what to do. You're going to be here, you know, in some cases 50 years. It will take you 50 years to get your paperwork through because we didn't plan this properly. We didn't, you know, even though we knew there were going to be 300,000 people, we didn't actually think there were going to be 300,000 people. That's basically what the government's saying. They're saying, we don't know what to do with you. You're here. That's great. So yeah, I think we need to be fair and compassionate to these people. We invited them to come to our country, and yet this government has not made a pathway for them to actually process their paperwork. And now they're stuck. They are stuck in limbo for potentially 50 years.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. L'Honourable Député de Rivière.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank our colleague for the speech. Now, I'd like to hear his thoughts on the implementation of these measures, reinforcing the border. I mean, I think we all agree on that. We could have disagreements on how to do it, but I think we agree that on the need to do it. Border agents that appear before committees of this House have told us at several occasions that they don't have enough staff to do the searches because they can search one container out of 100 at Montreal Port, for instance. So I agree with the principles stated here, but how can we put everything in place, these measures? Would my colleague look favorably upon the government investing more in border staff at airports and ports? And a secondary question: if his government forms, if his party forms government, would they be open to giving more funding to the border services?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for that question. One of the problems that I've seen over the years from this government is that when there's a problem, the solution is throw money at it. We're going to add $1 billion for this and $100 million for that, and we hear this all the time, over and over again. We have a problem, the solution is money. And yes, we do need money. To hire more border guards takes more money, this is true, and I would be in support of doing what we need to get our security up to where it needs to be. But that has to also come with the ability to train and hire people. And that's not just about money. There's other factors at play there. And we have to also ensure that the laws that are in place are actually helping to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve. So having laws is great, but if we're letting offenders out on bail all the time, that doesn't help. And so we need to have a cohesive system. We need the money, we need training ability, and we also need laws that work together.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last very short period of time, I think it's 3 years, the Liberals have allowed 3 million temporary residents to come into the country now, which comprise over 7% of Canada's population. We're hearing about the potential abuse of the asylum system by people who are on these visas. Their visas expiring and they're being cancelled by unscrupulous immigration consultants to abuse the asylum system and to make false asylum claims. Can the member talk about whether or not he thinks the measures in this bill will be adequate enough to fix the mess that the Liberals have made after the disastrous #WelcomeToCanada tweet in 2017?
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for that question. She's very right that there's been a big mess created in terms of temporary residence. That's over 3 million people in our country right now. And this bill will not solve that problem. It absolutely will not solve that problem. There are fundamental issues with the way that the immigration system is being run in this country. There's fundamental errors have been made by this government in terms of not monitoring certain numbers, for example, the number of students that were permitted to come into our country. And as a result, we have the problems that we all know about. We have a lack of housing, we have difficulty in accessing health care, we have problems with jobs, and our youth unemployment rate's very high. These are all things that are connected together. And these are things that the government could have managed. They could have seen the implications of decisions they were making and the consequences of those decisions and worked together to mitigate some of those things. But they haven't done that. And so as a result, we have this problem in our country today, and no, this bill will not solve that problem.
Questions and comments? Question on commentary. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
John Rowe, colleague from Saskatoon West. Again, probing the problem if this is an omnibus bill. Most of the debate this afternoon on C-12 has related to its immigration and refugee sections, but there are sections on multiple different acts, and I'm hoping he'll agree with me that it would be far preferable, given the complexity of immigration and refugee issues, if this bill was split apart and only the Committee on Immigration and Refugees studied the sections that are about immigration and refugee, and not the section on the Coast Guard and the Oceans Act, not the section on trafficking and drugs and so on. To my friend from Saskatoon West, what do you think?
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for that question. You know, at the end of the day, I don't think Canadians really care who studies what. They want to see fixes, they want to see changes, they want to see improvements. And so from a technical perspective, the member is probably correct that, you know, how we deal with it in the House should be done according to who knows what about which area. But ultimately what needs to happen is that this government needs to propose solutions that actually fix the messes that they've created. And while this bill will fix some of those messes, it certainly doesn't fix them all. And so I'm looking for more from this government. Canadians are looking for more. They want to see changes, they want to see improvements that will actually solve the problems that Canadians are seeing every day in their lives.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Mr. Speaker, the member kind of sidestepped the question in regards to Ukraine. I'm a little confused in terms of whether or not they actually supported Ukrainians coming from Ukraine during the war. Maybe he can provide some very succinct explanation. Did he support that number coming to Canada? I think it's a reasonable question. The other thing is the province of Manitoba, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, the provincial government, many different stakeholders believe that the province of Manitoba wants to keep all the temporary workers that they currently have. And I'm wondering if you could provide a comment on that if he doesn't know what to say about Ukraine.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the question of Ukraine, of course, these are people who are fleeing war. Their houses may not even exist anymore, and we invited them to come to Canada. So they're here. They came here, and part of that deal, at least in their minds, was that there would be a path to permanent residency, and that has not been offered by this government. So I think, yes, those people need to be treated fairly, absolutely. And in terms of temporary people in general, we need to be very, very careful about how we manage the temporary residents in our country. We have to make sure that the policies that we have in place are good for our country and good for the residents that we invite to our country.
The Member for Oshawa, about a 45-second question.
It seems to me we need just a few more moments, Mr. Speaker, to touch on the fact that as I watch this over the years, Liberals are very good at creating chaos and then pretending by throwing money at it that they're fixing what they created. We're supposed to trust them after they created the problem in the first place. So I wonder if the member could touch on a matter of trust.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for that excellent question. I believe she said it very, very well, that this government creates problems and then they fan out money to try to solve them, and often those solutions don't happen. And I think that is one of the reasons why Canadians have grown very weary of this government over the last 10 years, why there is such high levels of angst in our country, why there is a lack of trust in government in general. We all feel that, and it's because of actions, I believe, taken by this Liberal government. And so it is important that we act well, that we make changes that are going to improve lives of people. And while this bill will do some of that, there is still much, much more to be done. Thank you.